At least 1,000 years before the medieval scribes start working on them, most myths and legends offered a base for many ancient religions. Uncountable vellums have been used during the medieval period to write down the translated semi-true stories. Stories which contain important meaning or symbolism for the culture in which it originates, but with mystical qualities, and have been passed on from person to person. These myths and legends are important today because they help historians piece together the past. Ex nihilo? Perhaps. But imagine living 5,000 years ago, before science as we know it today, before publishing and before schools. Humanity needed a way of understanding the world around them, specifically the relationship between humankind, a natural world, and divinity. This also with the mystery of the Nomoli gods and the stone figurines, what has baffled men since Portuguese sailors first discovered during the 1400s in Africa. I am your host, Maria-Anna van Driel, and you are listening to The Next Truth, where science and myth meet. And this week I am speaking with Bennett Vonderheide, also known as Nomoli Ben, about how old these figurines really are, who carved them and why, and do they still contain ancient mystical powers? Ben, welcome to the show of The Next Truth, where science and myth meet. You are almost a keeper from the Nomoli figurines, which have been found in Africa. How did you get into possession of these figurines? Because they are, well, a remarkable African art.
Yes, yes. Well, first, thank you for having me on the show, and welcome all of your watchers. And it's fantastic for you to be the first contact. I'm confident that very few, if any, of your viewers have ever heard of Nomoli. They have been powerfully and successfully suppressed, and it's wonderful for you to be the channel which they can be reintroduced and reawakened. In all of Germany and the surrounding countries, you are the foremost knowledgeable and inspirational force for the Nomoli. And thank you for the article you wrote. It was a fantastic article. How did I come to be? How did I come to be in possession of Nomoli? Well, that's a very good question. I wasn't by my choice. I was many years ago. There was an attempt to recruit me into the intelligence community as an operative a couple of times, one particularly in West Africa. And while I declined because it's just not my interest to work in that field, at the same time I became friendly with the individual they sent to make contact with me, and he was a diamond smuggler from West Africa. He was an American, and he was an intelligence operative, very similar to the figure represented in the movie Blood Diamonds by Leonardo DiCaprio. He would have been a real-to-life figure. And while I didn't have interest in diamonds, and I had no interest in international espionage and intrigue, I've always been interested in the things of the spirit and history, and so it was from him that I acquired the artifacts initially, and I told him that was my interest, to if they had, and of course virtually everyone who went into that area was looking for money, diamonds, and power. Uh, just wasn't a great interest in the artifacts, and I had interest in them, so I began to acquire them from him. Long ago, I didn't know what they were. The first stones I came across, I just had a deep affinity to them, and so I began to focus on acquiring more of them over many, many years. I didn't know that they were Nomoli stones. Well, I knew they were Nomoli, but I didn't know they were so unknown to the rest of the world. I anticipated that other people would have collections, that there would be knowledge and information throughout. And when I first, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, came out and looked and searched, I found there was no information available. And the more I looked into it, while there had been long ago, it's an interesting dynamics, and I'll get into that in a little while. But eventually I found that we had one of the world's foremost collections of Nomoli in my family, and we then provided them to the African Art Museum of Maryland, Doris Ligon and Professor Fori Anza from Howard University. Mm-hmm. And so we exhibited them in the museum, and that's how we came to find that it was such an unusual, rare, and powerful collection.
These figurines are being found in the region where also blood diamonds are being collected and other precious metals and crystals. Could these figurines possibly kind of guard for these natural treasures of Mother Earth?
Well, the Nomoli are known to be found where there are diamonds, which is why those seeking diamonds have always, when they find a Nomoli, they seek in that area for diamonds. As far as the purpose of the Nomoli, of course, there are many different figurines, and each one has specific purposes to be activated by the shaman, medicine men, medicine women, the chiefs, individuals. Overall, they are said to have come from the Nomoli gods, who the natives will contend and believe lived amongst them long ago, and were beings who had lived in heaven and misbehaved and were forced to live on earth and rained down as stones in the sky. And those are the Nomoli gods. So the natives would say these authentic Nomoli, which we have, were handed down to them by the gods for use and blessings, and for use throughout time to bestow upon them methods of finding the blessings and staying connected to the spirit realm.
So do you think that these figurines do open a new chapter in man's evolution?
Well, that's beyond my level of knowledge to speak on, but I can say this, that the Nomoli are very powerful, and they have a place in history. They certainly have a place in African history, and to rediscover and reawaken that is something of value. To recognize that there were godly forces at play in Africa is a good thing for not only the world, but for those who are descended from that area, to see that these beautiful and these blessed treasures are something to be proud of and to be reactivated.
I personally have lived for almost 3 years in Africa, and I have become to understand that African art is absolutely different from the Western art, but there is a little similarity. I have seen there are a couple of figurines with enormous heads, or their arms are bigger than normally. And in Western civilization, we know this as
a caricature.
Yes, that. I was thinking there is maybe a possibility that ancient African civilization just carved these, and this is me playing the devil's advocate, just carved what they saw in daily things, only a little bit exaggerated.
Well, it's certainly, my purpose is to reintroduce what we know and to allow and to encourage anyone else to have any opinion that they want. So I would not argue with that possibility. I would say that the natives contend that specifically if you were to go with the pure Nomoli, now Nomoli figurines can vary from those which most closely represent the Nomoli gods, whom they say visited and lived amongst them. Cross over to the other side, the extreme would be humanistic, with very humanistic features and normal, if you will, sized arms, legs, and etc. In between, there are those which are morphed, which are figurines which can conjoin the human qualities and the human features along with the Nomoli, which would, according to them, indicate when the Nomoli powers and the blessings and the virtues of the gods are conjoined with the human to rise the human to a higher level. The Nomoli gods themselves were said to have, just to touch on it's interesting, of course, in America we say an anomaly. An anomaly is a Nomoli. It's interesting. So there are so many of them. They're all anomalous. They're very unusual and different amongst themselves, which is beautiful from an artistic perspective too, and from an application. But the Nomoli gods were said to have eyes so bright that you could not look into them, that they were like looking into the sun. And they were said to have a voice so loud that when they spoke in one village, you could hear them far away in other villages. So when you see the true Nomoli figurines, they'll, generally speaking, have the large bulging eyes. And they will often have a large stomach also, which exudes the power of fertility to them. And then across the board, other ones, for instance, let's just take one that would be more for the village to have a if you were to use the word a moral compass, or to keep focused on things which are important. There are Nomoli, which we have, which are a mother nurturing its child. And that is not only used ceremoniously to protect the mother during pregnancy, during childbirth, and during early infancy, because there was a high infant mortality, of course, not only in old times gone by, but even these days. So that would not only be used by the mother and used by mothers in group ceremonies, it would also be on display in the village on a shrine to remind all those in the village to for the reverence they should have towards mothers, and how they should help and bless them in every way that they can, because of the importance of nurturing, and the children too, the importance of nurturing and protecting mothers and children.
These normally figurines are telling a story of evolution and protection.
Yes, and they are again to be used specifically for purposes, everything from fertility. There are those. The Mahanyate is a specific group of Nomoli, and those are what's called the chief spirits. And those would be used, and they would often again depict a combination of a chief figure with Nomoli attributes, perhaps, or a crocodile, which represents the power of the Nomoli crawling up the back, as you'll see one we have in the front. And what that would mean is what that would be representing and used for in the ceremonies to indoctrinate a new chief, and on a daily basis, again, at a shrine in his place of residence, or in a very important place where the shamans and the others would centrally focus. And that would indicate that they wanted their chief to have the attributes that would be best for the tribe. Those would be things that would be blessed with, such as a righteous, a caring heart, a brave spirit, a solid body, physical strength, all the things that you would want in a chief, because, of course, there were not unlike many cultures in the world who felt that their chiefs were somewhat connected to the gods, either descended from the gods or at least infused with the godly connection, or if not, the village would suffer.
I'm looking behind you, and one of the figurines is standing there with you. Does that have a specific meaning for you, or is that a connection between you and the figurine?
Yeah, well, there's one over here. That's the Dogon connection. There's one in front of me that's very powerful, that's connected with the elongated alien heads. There's one over there which is very, very old, and primitive in artistic rendering. There's one here which is again an elongated head and a chief combination, and this one here is the Easter Island stone, and then down here is a diamond divining stone. So yes, I have surrounded myself with Nomoli for today's event. This one here, is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Well, I want to mention now before I discuss that specific stone. It'll lead into that. The interesting thing about Nomoli is when we began to reach out a number of years ago, my son, he reached out through social media and tried to find others who had experience with Nomoli and healings and knowledge of their power, even any knowledge that they existed. And today we have a very great awakening in crystals and healing stones. So he went to those groups.
Yeah.
And we found, without exception, that no one had ever heard of Nomoli. Amazed. Went to the crystal show in New York, outside New York City. Sat there for 3 days and showed the Nomoli. No one had ever seen them before. Went to the MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. We figured these guys, because they're ancient alien stones, they were depicting the stone gods that came from the heavens, would know. And lo and behold, we found that even the foremost experts had never heard of or seen the Nomoli figurines. Absolutely amazed to me. So you start wondering, are they real? Is this a fabrication, as we've seen other stones that are made because they can sell them? But no, you look back and you'll find that it's more recently they've been so effectively suppressed. Although they've been attempted for long, there's never been so powerful result as now. You look back and you can see that they were first discovered by Portuguese sailors who landed in West Africa in the 1400s and written about. So there's nothing new. You know, they were substantiated way back then, and it was indicated that they were found randomly buried in the jungles. And I'll get back to that too further along the line. But the important thing is then you move forward to as early as 1855 in Thompson on Africa. They mentioned the Nomoli for a couple of pages, and shortly after that, within years, he had collected some himself. And then you fast forward to the 1890s, there are a number of things written. In 1917, Walter Edwin wrote a very interesting few pages in his book on the Nomoli, which is very interesting in some of his theories and his primary theory that he picked up from the natives. And then you can go on to 1950s. This is what I'm getting to with this stone. I'm circling around. I'm getting to the answer. Trust me. And in 1850s, I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar as you are with Thor Heyerdahl and the Kon-Tiki. In the 1900s, Thor Heyerdahl was a gentleman who believed that the Western South American people had first discovered the Polynesian islands and not the Orientals. So he set off on a boat that was constructed exactly like one 1,000 years ago, made out of the same materials, and he set out with no motor, with a small group of guys who were a little bit nuts, and they floated for thousands of miles, and they found they landed on the Polynesian islands, and it was huge worldwide, amazing, because he was told, everybody said he was crazy, he was wrong, there's no way, he's not going to make it. And if he was wrong about his theories, but he proved it. And his basic theory was that the ancients used the waterways as a thoroughfare. It was not an obstacle to them. That they had figured out ways to move around the planet long before we gave him credit for it. But anyways, very interesting character. He was also the first one to lead an expedition on the Easter Island. Here I'm coming around to the point of the stone. In his writings in the 1850s, he says that the Nomoli from West Africa are the closest he can find of stones that are similar to the small stones which are found in caves, secret caves, in Easter Island. Most of your readers will not be aware that there were small figurines. We know the giant stones all over Easter Island, but there were actually very small secret stones that were kept in caves, and they were found, and he found some of them. And again, related that they were very similar to the Nomoli. I don't know if you can even find a view of any of those on the world today. I'm sure they were all taken by people long ago and are lost in collections. So that brings us to this stone.
Yes.
This is the stone. Two interesting things about it. One is it most closely represents what Thor Heyerdahl was talking about because it has a hole in the head of the stone. That was one of the point that he made. Now, in that hole,
Yes.
they would say, the natives would tell me that they put magical solutions in that hole when they had ceremonies, and that would induce a higher state for all those participating, if it was 10 or thousands or tens of thousands.
It almost sounds as if they were during their rituals using figurines as you are holding at this moment, but that they were influenced by Mother Nature to get to different realms and perhaps addressing ancestors or even look into the future as they could understand it from that period of time.
Yes. And there's a saying that goes with this stone, and it is, the wise man need not listen to all. The other connotation is that his ears are covered, but he is open to the universal message coming in from above.
Wait a minute, Ben. There was a moment of connection lost, so there were, I think, about 20 seconds that I haven't heard what you were saying. So I hope
that's what happens when I pick up these stones.
They influence my devices. Oh God, I had that also when I was talking to Dr. Seth Shostak about alien life forms, and you are talking about a form of alien life forms and rituals, and the same thing is happening. I don't know what's wrong with my connection with alien things, but it's somehow each time the connection is gone. It's so creepy. Okay, please.
You're just vibrating. You're vibrating at too high of a level for the computer to pick up.
I think so. So I should go.
So what I was saying was, the hole in the head represents a similarity to the ones found in the caves in Easter Island, and that when they used this stone or others with holes in their head like that in ceremony, they would put what they considered to be a magical solution in there, and potentially somehow, or their sense was that it were their contention is that it would increase or enlighten the conscious level of those involved in the ceremony, whether it's only a small group or whether it's tens of thousands, and it would raise their level of consciousness to the spirit realm.
It is a very nice. It has creepy eyes. I'm going to dream about that tonight, I guess.
Those are the bulging eyes. Artistically, very interesting too, that they make it balanced, even though it's leaning towards the back. Eventually, it's balanced so it stands straight up.
I see. Yeah. You said that only recently these figurines are coming into the news, into the world, and are starting to get a little bit known by people. Before that, there is a very large era of silence about these figurines. Now I was thinking, what if these figurines kept silence for all this time by themselves until the moment was there for us to go into a new idea, new thinking, a new form of life, a new era, which, Corona today is a perfect moment for people to think about Mother Earth, about nature, about their lives, about another way of thinking.
Well, I agree with you that there's no better time than now to awaken the blessing, but I would challenge that, because here's my own opinion, and I will qualify this as my opinion. I usually speak fact. In my opinion, when there is a blessing and a mechanism for God to help people, it's always wanting to be activated and used. And when evil forces are able to suppress it and shut it down, it's always waiting. Like the spirits are always waiting for us to ask them to help. They can't enter into our free will without our asking, but they always want to be part of it and be part of the life journey that we're on and help. I would contend that as they are blessings from God, they have anxiously awaited, and they have not been fully shut down. There have always been those who have used them. There are Dogon descendants today who have used them throughout history, who still use them. But for the masses, they have been shut down, and they've been awaiting for the time when people have an open mind, and they've been waiting patiently, I would say. But the forces that rile against them, the religious, social, cultural, political, medical forces which try to suppress ancient knowledge from West Africa and try to paint it as black and darken it and to demonize it, are very powerful. And for periods of time, as we know, dark forces can win out. But we also know in the end, God wins, and the light forces drown out the dark. So we're part of that, and that's what's really happening, in my opinion.
Certain figurines have a metal ball. When you read certain articles and your interview in the Next Truth magazine, the metal is not from the same era as that the figurines are. How do I have to see that?
Well, again, I would not state anything that would be scientific because I'm not qualified. I wouldn't say anything is or is not possible. But I can tell you the facts as we know them, is that in the 1990s, a very mysterious figure by the name of Angelo Pettoni was in charge of excavating for diamonds in Sierra Leone, West Africa. And he discovered a particular stone in his excavations. He discovered it in a strata that was 17,000 years old. And he kept that stone for himself. Shortly thereafter, he began to hear making a sound inside, a vibrational sound he felt. So he had it x-rayed, and they saw there was a metal ball bearing in the middle of it. And they extricated the metal ball bearing, and it was tested by Klaus Dana, who was an expert on items out of time, and in numerous laboratories, and it was found to contain chromium. And yes, chromium was not identified in modern science until the 1700s and wasn't isolated until 1790 some odd. So, which is the interesting thing, if you want to take it to the next level, is the stone did not have any indication that it had been drilled into or broken open and put the ball bearing in it. So the stone, if it was carved and put into the earth 17,000 years ago, it was carved out of a piece of rock. And the rock would have been potentially millions of years old. So how did this ball bearing get in the middle of a rock that was later carved and then buried in the earth that long ago? So I don't have the answers again, and I don't pretend to. I think it's important that, again, that I just state what I do know, and from Klaus Dana, his investigation, and from Angelo Pettoni.
When I was a youngster, I had a plastic flute, and it was carved into a little blue bird, and I put some water in there, and when I used it, there was a nice birdie sound coming from that. In ancient Mayan cultures, you also see certain flutes that they use with sand and water and etc. Now, you were explaining about the other figurine minutes earlier, that they can use it, or probably have used it, with substance for entering different kind of dimensions and realms, connecting with their ancestors for questions, for life questions, etc. Is there a possibility that you think that could be that this metal ball has been being born, so to speak, by means of, well, water or sand in combination with the stone itself, where it is carved from, that it, well, could have been born from the stone itself, and that's the reason why it's in there without having little holes in there?
Well, my limited knowledge on the subject, I'm sure that is scientifically impossible. Okay. With my limited knowledge of science, I'm very confident that that is scientifically impossible. But hey, unless there may be some way to shoot and focus some type of a laser or some type of array that turns the material inside into stone without affecting the parts that you are shooting through, such as they do with heart or other surgeries or dissolving things.
Do I understand you correctly right now? Are you indicating that there is a high possibility that an ancient culture, civilization from Africa had the knowledge to use a form of laser technology, but in a primitive manner?
Well, I didn't say that. I just answered your question as far as was it scientifically possible to have a ball bearing, let's say, spontaneously manufacture itself inside of a piece of stone. So my answer was, I would think that it might be possible with some form of laser, but I'm not qualified. I wasn't there, so I can't say. I mean, there are those, such as I mentioned, Walter Edwin, who wrote in the 1917s. There were those who contend that long ago there were civilizations in West Africa which were the first ones to build the pyramids, and they were highly advanced. There are those who feel that Atlantis was connected to West Africa. So I welcome all those opinions. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't, it'd be nice if I closed my eyes and suddenly had a vision and I was back in Atlantis and there was a wizard telling me what year it was, where it was, but I haven't had that vision. So people do out there. And bless them, but
that would have been such a nice theory.
That would be cool.
But yeah, I was also thinking about the ancient Egyptians and possibilities in technologies or using water to carve stone and sand and air pressure and etc. and heat. So but, you are surrounded at this moment with those figurines. Do you have at this moment a spiritual connection with them?
I'd like to think I have a spiritual connection at all times. And certainly I have found that the Nomoli stones are very powerful and helpful for not only myself, but I've watched them have profound impact on others. And we currently have a couple which have been acquired by modern day shamans in America and which have been being used for healing, meditation, and for whatever blessings they can be activated for.
Yeah, I read that some people are using these probably similar figurines but in gardens and their home for blessing and good luck.
Yes, and there are many reproductions which can be used there. I doubt that very many people will use the museum quality stones in their garden, but there may. Most of those would be irreverent from a perspective of the natives to leave them on the ground. They could generally and traditionally keep them on a shrine, even if they do use them for fertility for the crops when they find them, because they're found randomly. Unlike other figurines around the world that your viewers would have seen, these are not found in grave sites or at burial sites or places where temples existed. These are found mostly randomly in the middle of the jungle, anywhere from a couple feet to 50 meters down. And there are no indications of who buried them, when they were buried, or why they were buried. And it is a completely verbal history that they keep. There is no written antiquity in that area. So anything that is available as far as the information is coming from the bush for the most part. Except for, of course, there's those written information that we've been able to identify that was in the day when they were more well known. And there was a time again when they were very highly collected to the point where there were many reproductions made, and I guess fakes you would call them too out there.
Can people get in the possession of a Nomoli figurine?
Yes, we've made some of our collection have been made available. This is the only museum exhibited collection that I know of that is available. And we want to get them into the hands of people and get them into healers and get them around the world and reactivate them. And there are many, again, replicas that are available for those who would just like to have the image and to have a figurine that they might put on their shrine at their house or their meditation table.
But they don't have the same power or mystical power as the original ones?
I would think that that would be the case from my experience. It would be dynamically different.
What is the message that the Nomoli figurines are sending out into the world?
I can't speak for all Nomoli figurines, but I can say that overall there are blessings. So I think that if I were to try to encapsulate the message, it would be that there are many blessings available that are available to people, and that they should avail themselves of any and all godly apparatus which they can find along the way, help themselves and others.
What is the message that they gave you personally?
The message they gave me is, you're it.
You're it.
Well, you know what happens, you understand this better than most, Maria, when you find something really cool, and then you identify that no one else knows about it. So it's two. One, it's a real blessing. On the other, it's quite a responsibility. So the message they're telling me is that I am to pass on the word and pass on the stones, pass on the blessing. Until anybody else comes along and wants to take up the job, we're welcoming all and any and all people who want to pass the word on and get the blessings out there. When I say me, I'm me and my son Quinn sitting here next to me, who is the brains behind the operation and the youth driving the force.
I hear you, but I already have a job and I spread out the word in a different way. So I cannot take another job in there with me more.
Well, you've already done. You're doing it right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. When listening to you, I personally hear the message coming across as these figurines are coming together through communication.
Well, yes, the first stone that I picked up and meditated with is one that represents communication, I've been told, and I think that it is right now it's an awareness and exposure campaign. So it's getting the message out. And certainly, while I did, as you know, appear on the Ancient Aliens television show, and that had a lot of viewers, the real message is going out through people like you, directly to those viewers who are in tune with this and can receive it and carry it forward also. And that's real exciting, because this is the day where you don't need to be a network, and you don't need to be a mogul, and you don't have to go and pass all the tests that they want you to pass in order to be on their network TV shows. You create your own, and you get the word out, and then it spreads the blessing far beyond. And you, sitting in Germany right now, have likely viewers all over the world. And so this is it. This is what's happened. We're excited over here.
The first step into the world for the Nomoli stones. Ben, I see that we are almost running out of time, but before we close out, where can we find you? Where can we buy the Nomoli figurines? Perhaps you are going to write a book in the future about these figurines?
We have been working with Professor Figurines on putting together the first book on Nomoli, but we're also working on a television series, and that may be an internet series, and that may be the way to reach more people in today's world, and also potentially a documentary. And ancientalienstones.com is our website, and I have an email at ben@ancientalienstones.com. Your viewers can go on there and watch the video of our stones in the museum, and they can see a number of the examples. People can connect and receive message and get a powerful impression just by watching them. And the professor speaks about it. There's also a video on there with Jeff the shaman doing a healing with the Nomoli stones, with the new paranormal technology cameras engaged. So that's me and my son have done a fair amount of, quite a bit of investigation and put together the information so that it is in one space and available. And of course, I'm again excited to appear on your show And I don't think we're running out of time. We have the rest of our lives to work with here, so we're good to go for a while.
Thank you all for tuning in this week on The Next Truth, where science and myth meet. Make sure to visit our website, www.nexttruth.com. That is nexttruth, all in one word.com. And let us know what you think about our podcast. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we would appreciate a rating on our website in the section The Next Truth Podcasts. Or if you would simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us too. I am Maria Anna van Driel with The Next Truth. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode.